All right, so my name's Danilo, and this will be my slides. Share this real quick. This is so weird. So I had chapter 5, which was health, and as I said, my name is Danilo. So for my outline, I'm going to cover 4 different topics. The first one will be population control in foreign countries. The second one will be what is wrong with big families. Third one will be, do the poor control their fertility decisions? And the fourth will be children as financial instruments. So for this chapter, they really talked about the problem of population control. And for the first part, they talked about the mid-70s for India. They talked about how Sanjay Gandhi, the son of Mahatma Gandhi, was an influential role during the emergency period. In 1971, the mobile sterilization was a huge part of keeping the population down. So basically, not to get too direct, but the men would have their sex organs cut off. And this was under Kerala. This would gain huge momentum, good and bad, but it did help with lowering the total amount of people. And they really took it to extreme. And the chief of Uttar, he wrote that informed everybody that failure to achieve the monthly targets will not only result in the stoppage of salaries, but also suspension and severe penalties. Furthermore, the parents of school children were visited by teachers who said if they have more children, these children might not be able to get educated because there's so many people. And if you weren't sterilized, then your children also had a chance of not being able to attend school. And it got so bad that Udawar, all male villagers were rounded up on bogus charges and forced to be sterilized. So then they tried taking a more positive route in 1976, where they started promoting incentives to get sterilized. And that helped a lot because it went from 8.25 million people sterilized to going up to almost a quarter of India being sterilized total. In China, you saw that families were limited to 1 child to help. And some other important facts are that 85% of the population of developing world lives in countries where the government has an explicit view that their population was too large and needed to be controlled through family planning. This basically means that a lot of the poorer countries know that it is a problem, that there are so many people, but they don't really know how to stop it. Furthermore, population growth hurts the earth too. With more people, the more CO2 emissions there will be, and the more water they'll drink, so water will become more scarce. And for the next slide, I had what is wrong with big families. Studies have shown over time that rich countries have lower population growth. A good example of this is how Ethiopia has a fertility rate of 6.12, whereas US, who is 51% richer, has one of 2.05. And there's this famous Reverend Thomas Malthus, who was quoted saying, resources countries have are more or less fixed, example being land, therefore the population growth has bound to make people poor. That's basically saying that we only have a finite amount. If the more people there are, the more pieces of the pie they get. And then there's an example of this where he also goes on to talk about how the Black Plague should be credited for the high wages that followed the epidemic because it killed so many people. So there was, more jobs to be filled, so people were paying more. Furthermore, South Africa in a research project saw that because of HIV and how many people have died, they are 5.6 more wealthy than they would be if HIV was never a thing. which is very interesting. Lastly, it's seen that sort of this example of so many people, if you break it down to a family level, that each child will get a lower quality of life because their parents only have a finite amount of resources. And it's also bad for the mother's health, because it is seen that there's an example right here. Oh, I can't find it. Sorry. But the last example I would like to go goes into this one. Do the poor people actually get a control if they're having children or not? And there was a great example of this in I believe it was in Bangladesh. 121 countries in 121 villages in the country. I meant to put village participated in the FPMH, which is the Family Planning and Material and also Child Health Program project, led to 1.2 less children and girls ages 30 to 35. Also, because there's less children being born, the child mortality rate dropped 25%. Furthermore, usually women suffer, like I was saying before, women suffer when they have too many kids. Women who had access to family planning as teenagers were 7% more likely to find work than those who did not. And Métis women were also heavier and taller and earned more when they had less children. Lastly, as children as financial institutions. Men want more children, that's a greater chance of one of them turning out to be the next, great NBA player or, next doctor, where that can get them out of the slums versus the women, are more realists and they realize I can't bear 6 children. It's going to hurt my health. Children can also be seen as, economic futures, insurance policies, investments, saving products, even lotto tickets. But they're also used in the fields a lot of these times in developing countries. In rural Burkina Faso, families could increase production by 6% because of these kids. Oh, and I sort of messed up there. So there's also a project seeing that how men and women don't get along in the fields. There was this project in rural Burkina Faso that if they just split the soil evenly, instead of the men having 80% and the woman having 20%, they could grow production by 6%. And that was interesting because it talks about how the children are working the fields in these developing countries. So in summary, developing countries have a hard time with population growth. Big families tend to be unhealthier and poor. Families in developing countries do not have access to contraceptives, and the battle between having to have less children but needing them for the work is constant. Once again, my name is Danilo Herger. Thank you for listening. All right, so